Hi, I'm Maggie. Thank you for stopping by Crafts the Charm today. I'm so glad you're here. And this year is the 50th anniversary of the Jaws movie. And the Jaws movie is a movie that my family watches on the 4th of July outside. So I wanted to create some decor for our 4th of July Jaws viewing for this year. What I'm showing you here is an article in the Cape Cod Times about an exhibition at the Martha's Vineyard Museum for the 50th anniversary of Jaws, and that's going to be at the Martha's Vineyard Museum through September 7th. If you are up this way, there is a lot to do on Martha's Vineyard, so I do recommend a trip out there if you have a chance. So I have 3 projects, and the first one is sort of a dupe of the cabanas on the beach in Jaws. And I did actually buy some red and white striped outdoor fabric for this, but I think I'm going to save that for another project because this is so much cheaper and easier. So what I have here is some table covers. These happen to be 54 by 108 inches. And the red ones I got at Walmart. They were $1 each, but Walmart didn't have any white ones. So the white ones I got at the Dollar Tree, so they were $1.25 each. And what I'm going to do first is open them up, and I can make one red and white striped, let's say curtain, but it could be a table cover, or you could use this to make pillows. There's just so much you could do with this. I'm going to make one from 2 tablecloths, a red one and a white one. So first thing I'm going to do is unfold them. So I'm going to cut them the long way. So I need to unfold them and get them stretched out the long way. And then I'm going to fold them up again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it basically folded in half. I'm going to work with 2 layers, but I'm going to fold it up the other way just so I can easily cut it on my cutting mat. And I'm going to cut it down the middle. So again, it's folded in half and it's a 54-inch tablecloth. So I have 27 inches. I'm going to cut it down at 13.5 inches. You can kind of go by the folds, but it's not exactly in the middle. So I'm just going to cut it down the middle. So I'm going to do that for a red one. And I'm going to do that for a white one. And then what I'm going to do is lay this out on a piece of parchment paper on an ironing mat. And I'm going to overlap just, I don't know, about 1.5 inches. You can make the seam whatever you want. And just try to get that lined up really nice and straight. Put another piece of parchment paper on top, and then I'm going to iron that seam. Now, I started with a low iron setting, and that wasn't quite hot enough. So after you've ironed it, just try to peel it up. And if it peels up, that wasn't hot enough. But I would definitely start at a low setting. I went up a little too high. I found that the silk setting for my iron was perfect. So just iron that for a few seconds, and it should be laminated together. And then what I'm going to do is iron just the regular tablecloth as well, so even where it's not overlapping, just because I like the way it feels laminated together. It's much stiffer. It's also a little bit wrinkled, but I don't mind that. I think it's worth it to get that stiffness. So I am just going to continue down that seam, ironing it a little bit at a time, and then ironing the tablecloth on either side of the seam. And as I go, I found it's easiest to roll up the part that I've already ironed. So I think I was 12 years old when I first tried to read the Jaws book, and I didn't make it past where they find the body of the first person killed by the shark. But I love the movie now. Do you? Tell me about your experience with the movie or the book. Do you love it? Is it too scary? Drop me a comment. Once I got to the bottom, I found that my tablecloths weren't exactly the same length, or my seam maybe wasn't exactly straight, but that's okay. We'll straighten it off at the end. Also, I made a couple of little mistakes where I accidentally touched the iron to the tablecloth without the parchment paper and it made a couple of holes, but I'll show you how to fix those too. So once I've got two laminated together, so a red stripe and a white stripe, I'm going to add the other two stripes, and I'm going to do these at the same time, but you could do them one at a time. The trick is, if we had the red overlapping the white, then for the next one, we want the white to overlap the red. That way, the stripes appear to be the same size. So I'm just going to continue with my next two pieces, ironing the seams and ironing the tablecloth on either side of the seam. And then once we're done, we have a really huge curtain, which costs $2 if you were able to get your tablecloths both from Walmart, and makes a big impact and so easy to do. So what I'm going to do now is just sort of square off that bottom. So just sort of fold it up and just cut the bottom straight across. And this gives me some pieces of plastic left over that I can use to fix any little mistakes I made by accidentally ironing a hole into my curtain. So the way to fix these is really easy. Just make sure you have your parchment underneath the hole, cut a little piece to patch the hole, put it over, put parchment on top of that, and then just iron that over. And it doesn't look perfect, but it's actually pretty hard to see, and especially since the fabric is already a little bit wrinkled from the whole laminating process anyway, it's really not that bad of a patch. Now, once you have this, how you're going to hang it definitely depends on where you're hanging it. So you can fold the top over and give yourself a sort of a loop like a regular curtain, and just iron that together. Make sure you don't iron the loop together. You can put something in there, like maybe a curtain rod or a dowel or some rope, just to make sure you don't laminate it all together, and then laminate that seam. Or you can use it as a tablecloth. If you're making pillows, you can laminate them together and stuff them with maybe plastic bags. But what you've got is just this really big impact, red and white striped piece of fabric, like the cabanas on the beach in Jaws. Now, for this second project, I really wanted to make the sign that Chief Brody makes once he decides that the water isn't safe, the no swimming hazardous area beach closed sign. And you can see this is a version of the sign that's being sold by Oriental Trading Company. And you can see just sort of from the side, this is the sign that I suppose was one of the signs in the movie, because there's more than one, in the Martha's Vineyard Museum exhibit. So I'm going to try to make the sign look like these signs. And what I have here is a piece of, I don't know if you call this masonite or MDF. It's that sort of wood composite that pegboards are made of. And this is left over from another project, something I made for somebody else, a wall hanging. And it's not the exact same proportions as the sign that's being sold by Oriental Trading Company, but I felt like the proportions were close enough, so I didn't have to recut it. I'm just going to work with what I have. And you'll notice that the sign itself looks very weathered, so I'm going to try to achieve that weathered effect on the smooth side of this board. And I went through a few steps. You can decide which of these steps you feel are necessary. I started by painting it with some black chalk paint. This is Folk Art Home Decor chalk paint in rich black. And that's because I thought that might show through a little bit, but I don't think it does. But on the signs that I'm using as a reference, they look like they're black on the edges. So I also painted the edges of this. And because I thought that this black would be sort of showing through, I took a toothbrush and dragged it through the paint while it was still a little bit wet to give it a sort of a wood grain. But I don't think that's necessary because I didn't end up having this black show through. So then I painted, once that had dried completely, Folk Art Home Decor chalk paint in, I think this is oatmeal. It's either oatmeal or Castle. I used both of them. And I started by trying to brush it so that it would pick up the texture that I'd put on, but I ended up giving up because I just wasn't getting the right look and just painted it completely with this paint. So I do think that was the Castle, and now I'm brushing over that with the oatmeal. And then I brushed through that while it was wet with some apple barrel acrylic paint in burnt umber. I'm trying to get that weathered background look that the signs have that I'm using as a reference. So then, once that had dried, I painted over the whole thing with Folk Art Home Decor tuck paint in white Adirondack. And I did this very roughly so that those underlying colors could show through. And I felt like with this paint I had finally achieved the look that I wanted for the background. So now I need to paint the sign on, and I absolutely do not trust myself to do this freehand, but I do want it to look like it's hand painted on. I don't really want to stencil it. So I did cut a stencil out. I used the sign from Oriental Trading Company to isolate the letters, and I used my Cricut to make a stencil from those letters. And I should have trusted them, so I aligned them on the sign to match the sign in the movie. And then I used just an acrylic black paint, apple barrel acrylic black paint, to paint the black parts, and apple barrel bright red to paint the red parts. But I started out too narrow. I just didn't trust how fat these letters were, and painted it through once, and then I went back in and made them a little thicker. And when I did that, I was able to fix the shape of the letters somewhat, so I'm really trying to get the same shape of the letters as on the original signs in the movie. So after I thickened all those letters up, I was pretty happy with it. I think it actually could still stand to be a little bit thicker, but that was what I was comfortable with. So what I did then was I spray painted the back of the sign with black spray paint, this black spray paint that you can get at either Home Depot or Lowe's, the really inexpensive paint. And I sealed the front of it with spar urethane. This is a satin, indoor-outdoor. And then once that had dried, to hang that up, I want to staple some wire to the back of it, but the sign is pretty thin. So what I have here are just some ends of paint stir sticks. Isn't it a good thing I never throw anything away? And what I'm going to do is just trim those so that they're the same size. And I've drawn a line along the back, a couple of inches down from the top, and marked a spot about, 2 inches in from each side. And I'm going to use wood glue and glue these down. And I've selected some staples that should not penetrate the front of the sign if I staple through this wood and the sign. And then I'm just going to staple some florist's wire to the back on each side and then twist the wire around itself so that I can hang this. And I'm pretty pleased with how this came out. This was definitely a project I really wanted to do. And to go with this, I picked up a couple of these sharp-shaped kickboards, inflatable kickboards from the Dollar Tree. I looked for them all last year and couldn't find them. This year I was able to find them. And just gonna throw those in the pool to go along with the sign. Now for the third project, I'm going to make the life preserver from the Orca. That's Quint's boat that they take out to hunt the shark. And what I have here is, I think it's a 14-inch wreath form from the Dollar Tree, one of the metal ones, but it's broken in several places, so it's really not much good to me at this point. And what I have is a pool noodle. Now, this pool noodle, I had cut off the end to do something with it. It's a little bit mangled, and I had cut a slit down the side. Well, what I'm going to do is cut it completely in half. So vertically. So I'm going to use half of a pool noodle here, and because it's not a whole pool noodle, it's not quite big enough, but I have the other half that I can use to supplement it. And I'm just fitting this over the wreath form and using some duct tape to hold it in place, and then where there are gaps, I'm just filling that in with pool noodle from the other half of the pool noodle. Now, I just wasn't happy with the shape from the pool noodle. It's probably fine. But I have this packing material. It's almost like batting that you would use to make a quilt. And it came packed around something, and I saved it. And what I'm going to do is duct tape that around the pool noodle. So it's just going to be just a little bit thicker. None of this is exactly the shape of the life preserver on the Orca, but close enough. Now, because the shape of this is so lumpy because of the duct tape, I was looking for gauze bandages, which I've used in the past for this sort of thing, but I couldn't find my gauze bandages. So what I'm using is this thick ribbon that is sort of like a mesh and attaches to itself pretty well. It's not like the really heavy-duty mesh ribbon, but anyway, I used 2 rolls of this from the Dollar Tree and wrapped these all the way around the life preserver, and that just held it together and gave it just a little bit more of a consistent shape. And then what I'm going to wrap over that is the sleeves from an old t-shirt that I had used to make some pillow forms last 4th of July. So they're not perfect, it's not a lot of fabric, but I was able to sort of finagle them around the wreath form. And I just used straight pins to stick them into the back. I started with hot glue, but the straight pins worked much better. And because it's a t-shirt material, it's a little bit stretchy, so I was able to get it relatively smooth over the entire wreath form. Now that that's all covered with the t-shirt, we need to put the rope around it, and that's held on by some, I think, canvas pieces at the 4 compass points. So I have some old canvas drop cloth here, and I want to say the piece is probably about 6 to 8 inches wide by probably 14 inches long. It's longer than it needs to be, and I need 4 pieces like that. So what I'm going to do first is fold them in and iron them so that they have neat edges, because I'm not going to sew these. And I have a piece of rope here from the Dollar Tree. It's one of the smaller pieces of rope in diameter because the larger piece looked too big to me. And I'm going to wrap each of these pieces of canvas drop cloth around the wreath and then glue them together, leaving enough space for me to put the rope through the top and glue it between the rope and the wreath. And I will be putting the rope through as I go. So glue it together, put the rope through, hold that at the top, and then glue it between the wreath and the rope. Now I'm going to paint this so that it's a more consistent color. The one on Quint's ship is basically all grayish, but it looks worn. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to paint over the whole thing, the gray t-shirt and the canvas drop cloth, with some acrylic paint. This is Apple Barrel white acrylic paint. And I'm just doing this roughly, but I'm trying to get it mostly covered. I feel like this life preserver looks like something that somebody made by picking up scraps in a boatyard, and I'm cool with that because it just looks messy and worn, and it looks nautical to me, so I'm happy with it, even though it's not an exact replica of the Orca life preserver. So once that had dried, I had to paint the word Orca on this. So looking at a reference photo, I sketched that on with pencil, and then did my best to freehand that on with some black acrylic paint. And here's the Orca life preserver. I've hung it up with my fishing net and my old bottles. I think it looks right at home there. So I'd love to know what you think of these Jaws projects. Please tell me in the comments. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you enjoy this sort of content, please subscribe to Crafts the Charm. Thank you for spending time with me today. Take care.